My parents paid for my sister's college, but not mine. At graduation, their faces went pale when we walked the same stage that day, my sister and I. Same gowns, same smiles for the camera. But behind mine, there was something colder. When the dean called my name, my parents' faces went pale. They'd spent 4 years calling me selfish, ungrateful, dramatic. 4 years paying every cent of my sister's tuition while I worked nights to survive, and now they were about to learn what those sleepless nights had built. It wasn't luck. It was justice in heels. Hi, I'm Nora. I'm 26, and I'm from Seattle. Before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, and drop a comment to let me know where you're watching from. This is how silence became my weapon. From the outside, our house in Seattle looked like a postcard. It had white shutters, a neatly trimmed lawn, and a porch swing where my dad Robert sometimes sat reading the paper. Inside, my mother Elaine kept everything spotless. We had family dinners every night at 6 o'clock sharp. We looked perfect. 2 daughters, 1 proud family. But love in our home wasn't a guarantee. It was a resource, and it was distributed unevenly. My sister Hannah and I were twins, but we were never equals. She was born 4 minutes before me, and in those 4 minutes, it felt like she had claimed all the softness in the world, leaving none for me. My mother adored her. Hannah was her sun, her moon, her entire sky. I was just a satellite orbiting in the cold distance. I learned this lesson early. When we were 6, I fell off my bike and scraped my knee on the pavement. Blood ran down my shin and I ran inside crying, hot tears mixing with the dirt on my face. My mother glanced at my leg, grabbed a paper towel, and pressed it against the wound. "You're strong, Nora," she said, her voice matter of fact. "You'll be fine. Go wash it off." Her attention was already back on the phone, where she was arranging Hannah's ballet class. I learned then that my pain was an inconvenience. 2 weeks later, Hannah sneezed during dinner. A single delicate sneeze. My mother's hand flew to her forehead. "Oh, sweetie, you feel a little warm." Within minutes, Hannah was tucked into the sofa under a thick quilt, a bowl of warm soup in her hands, and the television tuned to her favorite cartoon. She wasn't sick. She just sneezed. But she was worthy of comfort, of immediate and unconditional care. I sat at the table finishing my dinner alone and understood. She got softness. I got survival. This pattern repeated itself through our entire childhood. When we brought home report cards, my straight A's were met with a simple nod. "Good job, Nora," as expected. But Hannah's A-minuses and B-pluses were taped to the refrigerator. "Look, Robert," my mother would exclaim. "Isn't she trying so hard? I'm so proud." My father would smile and agree. He wasn't cruel, not actively. He was just a quiet man who followed my mother's lead. He fed the imbalance by never questioning it. His silence was a form of agreement. Birthdays were the clearest example. We always had a shared party, but there were 2 cakes. Hannah's cake was always bigger, more elaborately decorated, with her name written in looping, elegant script. Mine was smaller, simpler, an afterthought. One year, when we turned 10, I asked my mother why. "Well, honey," she said, not looking at me as she arranged napkins, "Hannah just gets so excited about these things. You've always been more practical." That was the word she used for me. It meant I didn't need things. I didn't need excitement or fuss or attention. I was the responsible one, the old soul, the one who would understand. But a 10-year-old doesn't want to be practical. A 10-year-old wants to feel special. I looked at Hannah, who was already showing her friends the new doll she'd received, a doll I had also wanted but didn't get. They hadn't forgotten. They had simply decided I didn't need it as much as she did. In middle school, I made the honor roll every single semester. The school would send a certificate home, and I'd place it on the kitchen counter. My mother would see it and say, "That's nice, dear," before putting it in a drawer. But the one time Hannah won a 3rd-place ribbon for a school art fair, for a painting I had mostly helped her with, it was framed and hung in the living room. It's still there today. My father's role in all this was one of passive reinforcement. He never openly favored Hannah, but he never defended me either. If I tried to speak up, to point out the unfairness, he would get a tired look on his face. "Nora, don't start trouble," he'd say quietly. "Your mother is just trying her best to love one child and manage the other." It wasn't just about material things. It was about emotional space. Hannah was allowed to have bad days. She could be moody, dramatic, and tearful, and my mother would coddle her, asking what was wrong, offering hugs and ice cream. If I was quiet or withdrawn, my mother's response was sharp. "What's your problem, Nora? Stop sulking. It's not a good look." My feelings were a burden. Hannah's were a script for my mother to perform her role as the perfect, caring parent. I learned to be self-sufficient, I taught myself how to cook because my mom was always busy helping Hannah with her homework. I learned how to fix the chain on my bike because my dad was busy driving Hannah to a friend's house. I learned how to be invisible, to take up as little space as possible, because the space was already occupied by my sister. Hannah wasn't a bad person. She was just a product of her environment. She was kind in a shallow way, the way a person is when they've never had to fight for anything. She genuinely didn't see the imbalance. To her, this was normal. She was the star. I was the supporting cast. She never questioned why she got the lead role. Why would she? It was all she had ever known. She'd sometimes share her new clothes with me, the ones my mother bought her on their special shopping trips. "Here," she'd say, holding out a sweater. "You can wear this one. The color doesn't look as good on me." It was a hand-me-down disguised as a gift. A gesture that was meant to make her feel generous and me feel grateful. I always said thank you, but the word felt like ash in my mouth. As we grew into teenagers, the differences became sharper. Hannah was popular, bubbly, the center of every social circle. I was quiet, observant, and kept to myself. I had a few close friends who saw the real me, but at home, I was still the practical, reliable, invisible daughter. The one who didn't need anything. My mother would brag about Hannah to her friends on the phone. Oh, she was asked to prom by 3 different boys. We have to find the perfect dress. I'd be in the next room studying for an AP exam, and my achievements were never mentioned. It was as if they didn't count. They were just what Nora did, expected, unremarkable. The house with the white shutters held a deep, unspoken rule. Hannah's wants came first. My needs were a distant second, if they made the list at all. I lived my life in the shadow of her light, a constant, chilling reminder that I was the other one, the one who had to be strong, because no one was going to be soft for me. Those years didn't just teach me how to survive. They taught me how to live without expectations. And that, I would later realize, was a strange and powerful kind of freedom. Senior year of high school was a blur of college applications, SAT prep, and the nervous energy of a future that was finally within reach. For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope that things might change. College was a clean slate, a place where the rules of our house wouldn't apply. It was a chance to be just Nora, not Hannah's sister. Both Hannah and I applied to the University of Washington. It was close to home, had a great business program, and we both, miraculously, wanted to major in accounting. We studied for our entrance exams together, filling out our applications at the kitchen table side by side. In those moments, it felt like we were a team. The 4-minute gap between us seemed to shrink. We were just 2 sisters, dreaming about the same future. The acceptance letters arrived on the same day in March. I remember watching my mom get the mail. She pulled out 2 thick envelopes, both bearing the university's crest. Her face lit up. "They're here," she called out. Hannah ran down the stairs and we opened them together. We both got in. We screamed, we hugged, and for one brief shining moment, I thought we had finally arrived on equal ground. My mother hugged us both, tears in her eyes. My father clapped us on the back, a rare, proud smile on his face. "My girls are going to college," he said. My girls. Plural. It was the first time in a long time I had felt included in that phrase. That night, we celebrated with a special dinner. My mom made lasagna, and we talked about dorm rooms and choosing classes. I allowed myself to believe. I believed that this was the start of something new, that my parents saw us as 2 separate, equally deserving daughters. The belief lasted less than 12 hours. That night, I couldn't sleep. I was too excited, my mind racing with plans. I went downstairs to get a glass of water. As I reached the bottom step, I heard my parents' voices coming from the kitchen. They were low, but the house was silent and the words carried. "Hannah's tuition is going to be a lot," my mother said. Her voice was practical, the same tone she used when discussing grocery budgets. "But we'll pay it in full. We've been saving for this. She shouldn't have to worry about a thing." I froze, my hand on the banister. My father sighed. It was a soft, weary sound. "And Nora?" he asked. There was a pause. I held my breath, my heart pounding against my ribs. In that silence, I begged for my mother to say the right thing. "Of course we'll pay for Nora too. They're both our daughters," but she didn't. "Nora will figure something out," she said finally. Her voice was firm, decisive. "She's the responsible one. She's smart. She'll get a scholarship or a loan. She always lands on her feet." My father didn't argue. He just said, "Okay, Elaine, if you think that's best." She always lands on her feet. It wasn't a compliment. It was an excuse. It was permission to abandon me. They weren't praising my strength. They were using it to absolve themselves of their responsibility. All those years of being the practical one, the strong one, had led to this. I wasn't being rewarded for my independence. I was being punished for it. The words didn't just sting. They branded me. They burned a truth deep into my skin. I was on my own. I turned around and walked silently back to my room, the glass of water forgotten. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, and the joy from earlier felt like a distant memory from someone else's life. The two thick envelopes meant two different things. For Hannah, it was a ticket, fully paid. For me, it was a challenge, a mountain to climb alone. I never told them I heard. What was the point? It would only lead to a fight where I would be called ungrateful or dramatic. They would twist it until I was the one in the wrong. So I stayed silent. The summer before college was tense. My mother and Hannah spent weeks shopping for dorm decor, matching bedding, fairy lights, a mini fridge. I took on extra shifts at the local bookstore, saving every dollar I could. When my mom asked why I was working so much, I just said I wanted some spending money. She nodded, satisfied with the answer, and went back to looking at color swatches with Hannah. I applied for every scholarship I could find. I wrote essays until my fingers ached. I got a few small grants, enough to cover my books and some fees, but not enough for tuition. I had to take out student loans. I filled out the paperwork myself, my father's signature a cold, detached scribble at the bottom of the page. He never asked what the numbers meant. He didn't want to know. The first few months of college were brutal. I was overwhelmed with classes, and the weight of my financial situation was a constant crushing pressure. By November of my freshman year, I was falling behind. A tuition payment was due, and I was a few $100s short. After weeks of anxiety, I swallowed my pride and called home. I remember standing in the dorm hallway, my phone pressed to my ear, listening to the phone ring. My mother answered. "Hi, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Nora, is everything okay?" Her tone was already guarded. I took a deep breath. "Everything's fine. I was calling because the next tuition installment is due and I'm a little short. I was wondering if you and Dad could possibly help me out. Just this once." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the television in the background. Then, her voice came back, as cold and sharp as ice. "Nora, we've already discussed this. We are paying for Hannah's education. That is a significant expense. We can't afford to pay for two. I'm not asking you to pay for everything," I pleaded, my voice cracking. "Just a little bit of help. I'm working, but I can't keep up. Your sister needs to focus on her studies," she said, as if that explained everything. "She needs our support. You are strong enough to handle this on your own." Tears were welling in my eyes, hot and angry. "So she gets support and I don't? Why? Why is it different for her?" Her next words were the ones that broke something inside me for good. "Because Hannah deserves it," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "And you don't." She didn't yell it. She stated it like a fact. Like the sky is blue and the grass is green. Hannah deserved it. I did not. I didn't say anything back. I couldn't. The line between us went silent, filled with everything she had just confirmed. After a moment, I hung up the phone. I slid down the wall in the empty hallway and cried. Not because I was sad, but because I was finally, completely, and irrevocably alone. That conversation was a turning point. It didn't break me. It did something else. It took all my pain and my hurt and my anger and forged it into a quiet, cold resolve. They had made their choice. Now I would make mine. I would never ask them for anything again. I would build my own future, and one day, they would see what they had so carelessly thrown away. College was supposed to be a great equalizer, a place where your past didn't matter as much as your future. But for me, it was just a new arena where the differences between my sister and me were thrown into stark relief. While Hannah's dorm room glowed with the warm, gentle twinkle of fairy lights my mother had helped her hang, my room was lit by a single, flickering fluorescent bulb in the ceiling that hummed with a tired, weary buzz. It felt fitting. Hannah's college experience was the one you see in brochures. She joined a sorority, went to football games, and spent her weekends at parties or on shopping trips with friends. My parents sent her a weekly allowance, a steady stream of cash that covered her social life, her new clothes, and her late-night pizza orders. Her life was cushioned by their support. My life was a relentless cycle of work and study. I got a job shelving books at the campus library, a quiet, lonely task that let me be close to the one thing I could afford, knowledge. My shift started at 8 p.m. and ended at midnight. After that, I'd walk across the cold, deserted campus to the Arts and Sciences building, where I had my second job. From midnight until 3 a.m., I was part of the janitorial crew. I cleaned classrooms, wiping down desks, mopping floors, and emptying trash cans filled with the discarded notes of students who were sleeping peacefully in their beds. Those early morning hours were the loneliest. The silence of the empty hallways was vast and deafening. The smell of disinfectant became the scent of my survival. I'd often find a quiet corner in an empty lecture hall to study before my shift ended, my textbooks spread out on a freshly wiped desk, the hum of the floor buffer my only company. When other students were waking up to go to their 8 a.m. classes, I was just getting back to my dorm, my body aching with a fatigue so deep it felt like it had settled into my bones. Sleep became a luxury. Most nights I got 4 hours, maybe 5 if I was lucky. My diet consisted of instant ramen, cheap coffee, and whatever free snacks I could find at campus events. Every paycheck was a frantic exercise in budgeting. I'd sit on my thin mattress with a notepad, allocating every single dollar. Rent for my cheap off-campus room I moved into sophomore year, tuition payments, utility bills, textbooks, groceries. There was never anything left over. Not for a new pair of shoes, not for a movie ticket, and certainly not for the kind of carefree fun my sister was having. Hannah would call sometimes, usually on a Sunday afternoon. Her voice was always bright and cheerful, full of stories about her sorority formal or a weekend trip she'd taken. She'd talk for 20 minutes straight about her life, and then, as an afterthought, she'd ask, "So what's new with you?" What could I say? That I'd spent the previous night scrubbing marker off a whiteboard? That I was so tired I had fallen asleep in the middle of a lecture? That I had eaten peanut butter straight from the jar for dinner 3 nights in a row? Sharing the truth felt impossible. Her world was so different from mine, she wouldn't be able to comprehend it. It would be like trying to describe color to someone born blind. One time, I made the mistake of being honest. I was exhausted, stressed about an upcoming exam I hadn't had time to study for. "I'm just really tired, Hannah," I admitted. "I'm working a lot." Her response was sweet, gentle, and completely clueless. "Oh, Nora, you should really manage your time better," she said, her voice filled with a sincere, misplaced concern. "You need to make sure you're getting enough rest. Maybe you should try yoga." I felt a surge of hot anger. Manage my time better? I was managing every single second of my day just to keep my head above water. My time wasn't mismanaged. It was sold to the highest bidder, my landlord, the university, the electric company. But I just said, yeah, maybe. It was easier to let her believe I was just bad at being a college student than to explain the reality of my life. Her ignorance was a shield that protected her from feeling any guilt, and it was a wall that kept me completely and utterly isolated. She never saw the dark circles under my eyes during our brief holiday visits home. She never saw the calluses on my hands or the worn-out soles of my shoes. She didn't see it because she wasn't looking. Nobody in my family was. To them, I was fine. I was Nora. I always landed on my feet. The hardest part wasn't the physical exhaustion. It was the emotional loneliness. I watched other students call their parents for advice or comfort. I saw care packages arriving at the mail center, filled with homemade cookies and warm socks. My phone never rang with a call, just to check in. My mailbox was always empty. The only communication I had with my parents was a tense, brief conversation once a month where my mother would ask if I was keeping my grades up, a question that was less about my well-being and more about ensuring I wasn't squandering the opportunity I was breaking my back to pay for. There were moments I almost gave up. I remember one particular winter night in my junior year. It was snowing outside and the heat in my apartment was broken. I was huddled under 3 blankets trying to read a chapter on corporate finance, but my hands were too cold to turn the pages. I had $50 in my bank account to last me 2 weeks. A new bill had arrived that day. An unexpected medical fee from a visit to the campus clinic for a persistent cough. I looked at the bill, then at my textbook, and I felt a wave of despair so profound it was suffocating. I thought about calling them. I thought about begging, but then I remembered my mother's voice on the phone. "Hannah deserves it. You don't." That memory was a splash of icy water. It extinguished the despair and left behind that familiar cold resolve. Giving up was not an option. Giving up would prove them right, that I couldn't do it on my own, that I wasn't as strong as they claimed I was. So I put on another sweater, pulled my blankets tighter, and kept reading. I wasn't just studying for an exam anymore. I was building a future she couldn't imagine and they couldn't touch. Every page I read, every shift I worked, every meal I skipped was a brick in the foundation of a life that would be entirely my own. They thought my struggle was a sign of my unworthiness. They never realized it was forging my strength. For 3 years, I moved through campus like a ghost. I was just another face in the lecture hall, another body in the library, another girl in the coffee line. Most people walked past me without a second glance. They saw a quiet, serious student, and that was all. They didn't see the double shifts, the constant anxiety over money, or the deep, aching loneliness. I had become an expert at being unseen because, in my own family, I had been invisible for years. Then, in my senior year, someone finally saw me. His name was Professor Lawrence. He taught my advanced corporate accounting class, a notoriously difficult course that was required for my major. He was an older man, probably in his late 60s, with a quiet demeanor and sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He didn't lecture with grand gestures or loud speeches. He spoke in a calm, steady voice, and he expected his students to be prepared, focused, and precise. I liked his class. It was challenging, but it was logical. The numbers made sense. There was no favoritism in a balance sheet. An asset was an asset. A liability was a liability. Everything had its place, and the final sum was always a reflection of the work you put in. It was fair in a way my life had never been. I sat in the front row of his class every Tuesday and Thursday. I never missed a lecture. I did all the readings, completed every assignment, and usually scored at the top of the exams. I wasn't trying to impress him. I was just trying to survive. A good grade in his class was essential for my GPA. One afternoon in October, he held me back after class. "Miss Thompson," he said, as the other students filed out. "A moment of your time." I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I immediately assumed I had done something wrong. "Yes, Professor?" He was looking down at my midterm exam, which he held in his hand. I had gotten a 98. "This is excellent work," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "But that's not what I wanted to talk to you about." He gestured to the chair next to his desk. I sat down, my hands clasped nervously in my lap. "I've noticed you," he said simply. "You're here for every class. You're always prepared, but you look tired, more than the other students." I was so surprised by his directness that I didn't know what to say. I just stared at him. No one had ever commented on my exhaustion before. No one had noticed, he continued, his voice gentle but firm. "I see you in the library late at night. I've seen you heading into the West Wing after hours where the janitorial closets are. You work for the university, don't you?" I felt my face flush with shame. I didn't want him to know. I didn't want him to see me as a charity case. I nodded, looking down at my hands. "Yes, sir. 2 jobs." He nodded slowly, as if that confirmed something he already suspected. He leaned back in his chair and was quiet for a long moment. I expected pity, or maybe an offer of an extension on an assignment. Instead, he said something that changed everything. "You remind me of myself when I was your age," he said, his voice quiet and reflective. "I came from nothing, worked 3 jobs to get through school. People looked right through me. They saw a poor kid, not a future partner at a firm." He leaned forward slightly, his eyes intense. "You're disciplined. You're unseen. That's a dangerous combination, Nora. It'll take you far." He called me Nora, not Miss Thompson. Nora. Hearing my own name, spoken with such respect, felt like a revelation. The shame I had felt moments before began to dissolve, replaced by a feeling I couldn't identify. It was a mixture of shock, relief, and a warmth that spread through my chest. He wasn't pitying me. He was acknowledging me. He was seeing my struggle not as a weakness, but as a source of strength. "I want to nominate you for something," he continued, pulling a brochure from his desk drawer. "The National Financial Scholars Program. It's a highly competitive scholarship and mentorship program for the top 1% of finance and accounting students in the country. It covers full tuition for the recipient's final year and includes a cash grant and a guaranteed internship at a top firm." I stared at the brochure. It looked official, important, and completely out of my league. "Professor," I stammered, I don't think I'm qualified for something like that." "Why not?" he asked, his gaze unwavering. "Your grades are impeccable. Your work ethic is undeniable. The other students in this program will have legacy connections and financial backing. You will have something they don't, resilience. They think they've earned their spot. You'll know you have." I didn't even know he had been considering me for this until that moment. He had seen my potential when all I could see was my struggle. For the first time in my life, someone in a position of authority was looking at me and seeing more than just the practical girl who would figure things out. He saw a scholar. "I'll write your letter of recommendation," he said, as if the matter was settled. "The rest is up to you. The application is extensive. It will require a lot of work." "I'm not afraid of work," I said, my voice finally steady. A small smile touched his lips. "I know," he said. I walked out of his office that day feeling like a different person. The world looked brighter, clearer. The weight on my shoulders felt a little lighter. It wasn't just about the possibility of a scholarship. It was about the validation. Professor Lawrence's belief in me was a gift more valuable than any amount of money. He had given me a glimpse of a future where my hard work was not just a means of survival, but a mark of distinction. That evening, I got an email from him with the link to the application portal. The deadline was in 3 months. For the first time in a long time, I felt a surge of genuine hope. I wasn't just the night shift girl anymore. I was a candidate. I was a contender. And I was going to fight for it. Professor Lawrence's nomination lit a fire in me. It was a quiet, controlled burn, a hidden source of energy that I guarded fiercely. The first decision I made was the most important one. I would not tell my family. It wasn't that I wanted to be secretive. It was an act of self-preservation. Good news had a short lifespan in our house. If I told my mother about the nomination, I knew exactly what would happen. She would offer a lukewarm, "Oh, that's nice, dear," before immediately pivoting. "Did I tell you Hannah was just elected social chair of her sorority? She's so good with people." My achievement would be minimized, dismissed, or worse, twisted into something Hannah deserved more. They would find a way to tarnish it, to make me feel like I was being arrogant or overly ambitious. This one thing, this one incredible opportunity, I needed to keep for myself. It had to be mine, pure and untouched by their casual cruelty. So I worked in silence. My life, which was already a tightly scheduled routine of classes, work, and study, became even more intense. The application for the National Financial Scholars Program was a beast. It required multiple essays, a detailed financial portfolio project, a series of academic and ethical questionnaires, and 3 letters of recommendation. Professor Lawrence wrote the first one. For the other 2, I approached my library supervisor and a professor from my economics department. Both were happy to help, impressed by my diligence and commitment. Gathering those letters was the easy part. The hard part was finding the time and energy to do the rest. My days became a strategic puzzle. I wrote essays during my 30-minute lunch breaks, my fingers flying across my laptop keyboard. I worked on the portfolio project in the dead of night at the library, surrounded by empty tables and sleeping books, fueled by cheap coffee from a vending machine. I ran financial models and market analyses until the numbers blurred together. Every rejection I had ever swallowed in my life became fuel. Every time my mother had told me to be practical, I used it to write a more pragmatic, hard-hitting analysis in my portfolio. Every time my father had told me not to make trouble, I used it to craft an essay about ethical integrity in the face of corporate pressure. And every time I remembered my mother's cold, final words on the phone, "Hannah deserves it, you don't," that became the fire that burned away my exhaustion and doubt. This wasn't just an application for a scholarship anymore. It was my answer to them. It was the culmination of every lonely night, every skipped meal, every silent sacrifice. It was proof that the daughter they had written off as a self-sufficient afterthought was building something they couldn't buy and couldn't control. There were moments when the pressure felt overwhelming. One night, about a week before the deadline, I was in the library staring at my final essay. It was about resilience. I had written and rewritten it a dozen times, but it still felt flat, impersonal. I was exhausted, running on 4 hours of sleep, and I felt a familiar wave of despair wash over me. I felt like an imposter. Who was I to compete with students from Ivy League schools, students who had never had to worry about anything but their grades? I closed my laptop and leaned my head against the cold window, looking out at the dark, empty campus. I thought about quitting. I could just press delete, forget the whole thing, and go back to just surviving. It would be easier. Then I thought of Hannah. I pictured her sleeping soundly in her warm, cozy room, her tuition paid, her future secure. I pictured my parents, proud of the daughter they had chosen to invest in, and the anger returned, cold and clear. It wasn't a destructive anger. It was a constructive one. It was the anger that had kept me going for 3.5 years. I opened my laptop again. I deleted the entire essay, and I started over. This time I didn't hold back. I didn't write a sterile academic paper about the theory of resilience. I wrote about what it felt like to clean a classroom at 2 a.m. while your classmates slept. I wrote about the quiet dignity of work. I wrote about what it means to be the only person you can rely on. I didn't mention my family. I didn't have to. The story was in what I left unsaid. It was honest, raw, and it was the truest thing I had ever written. By the time winter came, the application was complete. I sat alone at a carrel in the back of the campus library, the air smelling of old paper and dust. My hands trembled slightly as I hovered the cursor over the submit button. This was it. This was everything. I clicked it. There was no fanfare, no confetti, just a small message on the screen. Your application has been received. I leaned back in my chair and let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 4 years. A strange sense of peace settled over me. Whatever happened next, I had done it. I had done the work, on my own terms, in silence. The next 3 months were agonizing. I tried to put it out of my mind, to focus on my classes and my jobs, but the question was always there, humming in the background. Did I do enough? Was I good enough? The email arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. I was in my dorm room getting ready for my library shift. My phone buzzed on my desk. I saw the subject line, National Financial Scholars Program Decision. My heart stopped. My hands started to shake so badly I could barely unlock my phone. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for rejection. It was the feeling I was most used to. I opened the email. My eyes scanned the first line. Dear Ms. Nora Thompson, on behalf of the selection committee, it is with great pleasure that we congratulate you. I stopped reading. I read the line again and again. The words seemed to swim in front of my eyes. Congratulations, Nora Thompson. You've been selected as a national scholar. The scholarship covered my remaining tuition in full. It also came with a $10,000 cash grant and a guaranteed summer internship in New York City. I sat down on the edge of my bed, the phone still clutched in my hand. A sound escaped my lips. It was a laugh, but it was choked with a sob. Tears started streaming down my face, hot and fast. I laughed and cried at the same time, a messy, cathartic release of 4 years of pressure, loneliness, and silent struggle. They thought I couldn't survive without them. They had left me to fend for myself, confident that I would figure it out. And I had. I had figured it out so completely that I had now thrived in spite of them. This victory was mine. It was born in silence, and it belonged to me and me alone. In that moment, sitting in my small, cold room, I had never felt so powerful. After reading the congratulatory email for the 10th time, I finally lowered my phone. The room was silent, but my mind was roaring. A wave of giddiness washed over me, so potent and unfamiliar that I had to sit on the floor, my back against the flimsy wall of my dorm room. I was a national scholar. The words felt foreign, like a title belonging to someone else, someone smarter, richer, and more deserving. But the email had my name on it. Nora Thompson. It was real. The first thing I did was calculate. It was an old habit, a survival mechanism. I pulled up the university's financial portal and looked at the outstanding balance on my account. Then I looked at the scholarship details again. Full tuition coverage. A $10,000 cash grant. I did the math. Not only would my final semester be paid for, but I would also be able to pay off a small chunk of the loans I had already taken out. And I would have money left over. Real money. Money that wasn't already earmarked for rent or electricity. The sheer relief was a physical sensation. It felt like a heavy weighted blanket I had been wearing for 4 years was suddenly lifted off my shoulders. I could breathe. For the first time, I could actually breathe. That Friday, I walked into the campus administration building. Instead of avoiding the billing office as I usually did, I walked straight up to the counter. I gave the woman my student ID, and with a voice that was clear and steady, I said, "I'm here to pay off my remaining balance." It was the proudest moment of my college career. My second act of liberation came that evening. I walked across campus to the Arts and Sciences building, not with a mop and bucket, but with a simple letter of resignation. My supervisor, a kind older man named George, who had always looked at me with a sort of weary sympathy, read my letter. "You find something better, Nora?" he asked, his voice gentle. "Yes," I said, a smile spreading across my face. "I did." He shook my hand warmly. "Good for you, kid. You earned it." Walking out of that building for the last time, without the smell of bleach clinging to my clothes, felt like a parole. I was free. I decided to quit the library job, too. The grant money meant I didn't need to work for the rest of the semester. I could just be a student. It was a role I had never been allowed to simply play. The changes were subtle at first. I started sleeping 8 hours a night. The dark circles under my eyes began to fade. I bought groceries from the real grocery store, not just the discount aisle. I bought fresh fruit, vegetables, and a small steak just because I could. I started sitting in the campus coffee shop to study, buying a latte without mentally calculating how many bowls of ramen it was worth. My demeanor in class shifted. I was no longer the silent, exhausted girl in the front row. I started raising my hand, offering opinions, and engaging in debates. My professors, who had only known me as a good test taker, were surprised by my articulate and well-reasoned arguments. Professor Lawrence, in particular, watched me with a knowing glint in his eye. He saw the transformation, and he knew where it had come from. One day he asked me to stay after class again. "You seem different, Nora," he said. "Lighter. I got the scholarship, Professor," I said, my voice filled with a gratitude so immense I could barely contain it. "I wanted to thank you. You changed my life." He waved his hand dismissively, though I could see the pride in his face. "I didn't do anything, Nora. I just opened a door. You were the one strong enough to walk through it." What are your plans for the internship in New York? We spent an hour talking about the city, about the firm I would be working for, and about his own experiences as a young, hungry accountant trying to make his mark. He gave me advice not just about finance, but about life. He told me to never forget where I came from, not as a source of shame, but as a source of strength. You've already survived the worst, he said. Corporate America will be easy after that. While my inner world was transforming, my contact with my family remained exactly the same. They were oblivious. I knew Hannah's graduation was approaching, a date that was, of course, the same as my own. My mother called one afternoon in April, her voice buzzing with excitement. "Nora, I need your opinion," she said without even asking how I was. "Hannah is trying to decide on her graduation dress. There's a beautiful white one, but she's worried it looks too bridal. Then there's a lovely blue one, but her friend is wearing blue. It's such a dilemma." I stood in my quiet, peaceful room, looking out the window at the spring blossoms on the trees. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were listening to a conversation from a movie. This was their world, a world where the color of a dress was a major problem. "I'm sure she'll look great in either." "Mom," I said, my voice neutral, "we're planning a huge party for her. You know?" She continued, not noticing my lack of enthusiasm. "At the country club. All our friends will be there. We're so incredibly proud of her. 4 years and she did it so beautifully. With your money, I thought. With your unconditional support. It's easy to be beautiful when the road is paved for you." But I just said, "That's great. She deserves it." It was a phrase I had heard my whole life, but now, saying it felt different. It no longer stung. It was just a fact. In their eyes, she did deserve it. Their definition of deserving was simply different from mine. "So, we'll see you at graduation, of course," she said, her tone shifting slightly, as if remembering I was also a participant. "Will you be coming to Hannah's party afterward?" "I'll be at the ceremony, Mom," I said, carefully sidestepping the second question. "Wonderful. We'll save you a seat at the front." She hung up, and I was left in the silence. They had no idea. They had no idea I was graduating with the highest honors in my department. They had no idea I had won a prestigious national award. They had no idea I had a 6-figure job waiting for me in New York City. They hadn't asked a single question about my 4 years of college, so it never occurred to them that I might have an answer worth hearing. In the final weeks before graduation, I used some of the grant money to buy myself a new suit for my internship and a simple, elegant dark green dress to wear under my graduation gown. I got my hair cut. I started going for runs in the morning. I was investing in myself, building a version of Nora that wasn't defined by struggle. I was no longer the unchosen one. I was the self-chosen one. My silence wasn't about hiding my pain anymore. It was about protecting my peace. And I knew, with a certainty that was as solid as the ground beneath my feet, that the silence was about to end. The week before graduation, I did something I hadn't done in 4 years. I went to a nice stationery store downtown. The air inside smelled of expensive paper and ink. I ran my fingers over the thick, cream-colored cardstock, a world away from the flimsy, recycled paper I used for my class notes. I chose a box of simple, elegant invitations. They had a clean, minimalist design with the university's seal embossed in gold at the top. Back in my apartment, I sat at my small kitchen table and filled one out. My handwriting was neat and deliberate. "Elaine and Robert Thompson, you are cordially invited to attend the graduation ceremony of their daughter, Nora Thompson." I added the date, time, and location. I didn't add any personal notes, no excited scribbles in the margins. It was formal, official, and impersonal. It was a summons, not a request. I addressed the envelope, placed a stamp on it, and dropped it in the mail. It felt like launching a ship into a calm sea, knowing it was headed for a storm. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Nora, we got your invitation." "It's lovely," she said, her voice filled with a practiced social warmth. "We were just assuming we'd come, of course, but it's sweet of you to send a formal one." "I wanted to make sure you had all the details," I said calmly. "Of course. Now what's the plan for the day? Is there a special luncheon for the business school graduates? Hannah's sorority is having a brunch beforehand. We'll be going to that, but we can certainly meet you there right before the ceremony starts. You must tell me what to wear. Is it formal? Business casual?" Her questions were a rapid-fire assault of logistics, all of them centered around appearances. She wasn't asking how I felt. She wasn't asking if I was proud of myself. She was asking for a dress code. "You should just dress nicely, Mom," I replied, keeping my voice even. "It's a standard university ceremony. Nothing out of the ordinary." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth. It was a carefully curated version of the truth, designed to keep their expectations low. The lower their expectations, the more powerful the reveal would be. "Oh, okay," she said, a hint of disappointment in her voice. She had likely been hoping for a more exclusive, prestigious event to brag about. "Well, we'll be there. In the front row. Your father is bringing his new camera. We need to get plenty of pictures of you and Hannah together. I'll see you there," I said, and ended the call before she could ask anything else. The morning of graduation was strangely peaceful. The sun streamed through my apartment window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. There were no frantic family members rushing around, no arguments over who got to use the bathroom first, no one telling me to hurry up. There was just me. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching other families walk by outside, laden with bouquets of flowers and balloons. I felt a pang of something, but it wasn't sadness. It was a quiet sense of separation, of having passed through a fire that had left me fundamentally different from everyone else. I showered and put on the dark green dress I had bought. It was simple, tailored, and made me feel strong. When I slipped the black graduation gown over it, I looked in the mirror. The girl staring back at me wasn't the tired, defeated 18-year-old who had moved into a dorm room 4 years ago. Her eyes were clear. Her shoulders were straight. She had dark silken hair and a calm expression. She looked like she knew who she was. I walked to the campus alone, my cap tucked under my arm. I saw them before they saw me. They were standing near the main fountain, a perfect tableau of a proud, successful family. My mother was in a string of pearls and a floral dress that probably cost more than my first month's rent. My father was fussing with his camera, adjusting the lens. And Hannah? Hannah was radiant in a bright designer dress, laughing as she posed for pictures. They looked like they had stepped out of a magazine. I took a deep breath and walked toward them. "Nora, there you are," my mother exclaimed, her smile wide and brilliant. She rushed over and gave me an airy kiss on the cheek that didn't quite land. "We were just about to look for you. You look nice." It was the same tone she used for a pleasant but unremarkable piece of furniture. "Hi, Mom, Dad, Hannah," I said, my voice steady. "Let's get a picture." My father boomed, raising his camera. "The two graduates together." He pushed me next to Hannah. She put her arm around me, her smile dazzling. "We did it, Nora," she whispered excitedly. I smiled back, a polite, practiced expression I had perfected over the years. The flash went off, capturing a moment that was a complete and utter lie. It captured two sisters, equal and triumphant. It didn't capture the 4 years of night shifts, the student loans, or the soul-crushing loneliness. As we walked toward the auditorium, their conversation flowed around me. They talked about Hannah's party, about the relatives who were coming, about the summer trip to Europe they were planning as her graduation present. I was an afterthought, a silent figure walking beside them. They didn't ask what my plans were after graduation. They didn't ask if I had a job lined up. They didn't ask about my friends or my favorite classes or a single memory I had made over the past 4 years. Their neglect was no longer a sharp pain. It was a dull, familiar ache, and today it was also my greatest advantage. Their complete and utter lack of curiosity was the reason they were about to be so thoroughly blindsided. As we reached the entrance, I stopped. "This is where I have to go in," I said, gesturing toward the student entrance. "My seat is with the other honors graduates." My mother's brow furrowed for a second. "Oh, well, all right. We'll find our seats. Remember, front row," she called after me. I nodded and turned away, melting into the sea of black gowns. I could feel their eyes on my back for a moment, but I knew their attention would quickly shift back to what really mattered, finding the best possible seats from which to watch their chosen daughter graduate. I found my seat, not in the general section with Hannah, but in a special reserved area right at the front, near the stage. My heart was calm. It was beating steadily, a quiet, rhythmic drum. This wasn't about revenge. I had realized that somewhere along the way. Revenge was a hot, messy emotion. This was colder, cleaner. This was about justice. It was about correcting the record. Today wasn't their photo op. It was my reckoning. The auditorium was a cavernous space, filled with the buzzing energy of thousands of people. The air was thick with the scent of perfume, hairspray, and the collective relief of 4 years of hard work coming to an end. From my seat in the front section, I had a clear view of the stage and an equally clear view of the first few rows of the audience. I scanned the faces until I found them. They were exactly where my mother had promised they would be. Front row, center. They looked pleased with themselves, perfectly positioned to witness Hannah's moment of glory. My father had his camera propped on his knee, ready for action. The ceremony began with the usual procession of robed academics and a long, meandering speech from the university president. I let the words wash over me, my focus entirely internal. I felt a strange sense of calm, the kind that comes when you know you are exactly where you are supposed to be. This was the culmination of everything. Every lonely night, every hour of exhausting labor, every silent tear had led me to this chair, to this moment. I watched as the deans of the various colleges began to call the names of the graduates. The rhythm was hypnotic. Name, applause, handshake, photo, repeat. When they reached the T's in the College of Arts and Sciences, I heard a small eruption from the front row. Hannah Elizabeth Thompson. My mother stood up, clapping enthusiastically. My father's camera flashed multiple times, a miniature lightning storm capturing his favored daughter's walk across the stage. Hannah beamed, waving at them as she accepted her diploma. It was a perfect family moment, a beautifully scripted scene of pride and joy. I clapped politely along with everyone else. One down, one to go. After the last graduate from the School of Social Work had been called, the university dean stepped up to the podium. He adjusted the microphone, a serious expression on his face. A hush fell over the crowd. Before we conclude today's ceremony, he began, his voice echoing through the hall, it is my distinct honor to recognize a few students who have achieved extraordinary distinction during their time at this university. These awards are reserved for those who embody not just academic excellence, but also profound character and resilience. I saw my mother whisper something to my father. She probably thought this part was boring. A delay before they could get to Hannah's celebratory party. The dean continued, today, we honor a student from the Foster School of Business who represents the very pinnacle of these values. This is a student who graduated at the top of her class, earning the designation of valedictorian for her department. I saw my mother's head perk up slightly. She scanned the stage, perhaps looking for a familiar face. The dean's voice grew warmer, more personal. But this student's academic achievements, remarkable as they are, tell only half the story. She is a self-made graduate, a young woman of incredible integrity who worked multiple jobs through all 4 years of her education, often working through the night to pay for her degree, chapter by chapter, credit by credit. I kept my eyes fixed on my family. My mother's polite smile was beginning to tighten. My father had lowered his camera slightly, a look of vague confusion on his face. Hannah was frowning, whispering something to my mother, and then, the dean delivered the final devastating lines. She did this entirely on her own, a testament to her unbreakable spirit. It is with immense pride that the university recognizes a graduate who achieved all of this without any financial support from her family. Please join me in congratulating our newest National Financial Scholar and this year's Business School valedictorian, Nora Grace Thompson. The name echoed through the massive hall. For a split second there was silence, and then the applause started. It wasn't the polite clapping that had followed the other names. It was a thunderous rolling ovation. The students around me, the ones who had been in my classes, who had seen me in the library at all hours, stood up. Professor Lawrence, sitting on the stage with the other faculty, was beaming, his applause loud and proud. But I wasn't watching them. My gaze was locked on the 3 figures in the front row. Time seemed to slow down. I watched my mother's smile crack and then completely shatter. Her face went slack, her skin suddenly pale against the string of pearls at her throat. Her clapping hands, which had started to move out of reflex, froze midair. My father's camera slipped from his knee and clattered onto the floor. He didn't bend to pick it up. He just stared at the stage, his mouth slightly agape, his face a mask of disbelief. And Hannah froze mid-text, her phone held limply in her hand. Her perfectly made-up face was a canvas of shock and dawning horror. Her eyes met mine for a fleeting second, and in them I saw it all. Confusion, embarrassment, and the sickening realization of a truth she had comfortably ignored for years. Without financial support from family, those 7 words, spoken so publicly, hung in the air like a formal indictment. They were a confession spoken on their behalf. I stood up. My legs felt strong and steady. As I walked the few steps to the stage, it felt like I was walking out of a shadow I had lived in my entire life. The applause was a deafening roar, but all I could hear was the profound, absolute silence from the front row. I walked slowly, deliberately. Every step was a reclamation. Every step said, "You did not break me." Every step said, "You underestimated me." When I reached the dean, he shook my hand firmly and placed a heavy gold medallion around my neck. He leaned in and whispered, "Congratulations, Nora. No one deserves this more." I leaned toward the microphone, my voice clear and calm, though it was only meant for him. "Thank you," I whispered back. "This one's mine." I took the diploma case, turned, and faced the cheering crowd. I smiled. a real, genuine smile of pure, unadulterated triumph. I didn't look at my family. I didn't need to. I had their silence. It was the only validation I had ever truly needed from them, and they had finally given it to me. After the ceremony ended, the auditorium erupted into a joyous chaos of flying caps, tearful hugs, and flashing cameras. I was immediately surrounded by a small group of my classmates and professors, all offering their congratulations. Professor Lawrence grasped my shoulder, his eyes shining with pride. "I knew you had it in you, Nora," he said. "New York won't know what hit it." I thanked them all, my heart full of a genuine warmth I had rarely allowed myself to feel. For the first time, I felt like I was part of a community, one I had built for myself, based on merit and mutual respect. Eventually, the crowd around me thinned, and I knew I couldn't delay it any longer. I saw them standing off to the side, near an exit, a small, awkward island in the sea of celebration. They weren't smiling or talking. They were just waiting. My father had retrieved his camera, but it was now hanging limply from his neck, unused. I took a deep breath, straightened the valedictorian medal around my neck, and walked toward them. The power dynamic had shifted so completely it was almost tangible. They were no longer the benevolent rulers of my world. They were disgraced politicians, exposed and uncertain. My mother was the first to speak, her voice unnaturally high and strained. She rushed forward, forcing a brittle smile onto her pale face. "Nora, sweetheart, congratulations. That was quite the surprise. We're so proud of you. We didn't know it was this big of a deal," she stammered, twisting the strap of her purse. Her eyes darted around, as if worried someone might be listening. The public praise had been immediately followed by a public shaming, and she was in full damage control mode. I looked at her, my expression calm and unreadable. I didn't offer her the comfort of an easy excuse. I didn't let her off the hook. "I know you didn't," I said, my voice soft but clear. "You wouldn't have come otherwise." The truth of the statement landed like a stone, and her smile faltered. She had no response. She just stared at me, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. My father cleared his throat, stepping forward to play his part. He put on his paternal, reasonable face, the one he used when he was trying to end an argument. "You were always so capable, Nora," he said, his voice a low rumble. "We knew you could handle it. We didn't want to hold you back, to get in your way." It was the most pathetic, transparent excuse I had ever heard. He was trying to reframe years of emotional and financial abandonment as a brilliant parenting strategy designed to foster independence. It was insulting. I held his gaze. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't get angry. I just asked a simple, quiet question. By ignoring me, the question hung in the air between us. It was so simple, so direct, that it left him with nowhere to hide. He couldn't argue it, couldn't twist it. His face flushed a deep red. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time in my life, I had left my father speechless. He looked down at the floor, defeated. Finally, Hannah spoke. She had been standing behind them, silent and ashen-faced. Her usual bubbly confidence was gone, replaced by a vulnerability I had never seen in her. Her voice was small, barely a whisper. "I didn't know," she said, her eyes welling up with tears. "I didn't know they didn't help you. I swear, Nora." I looked at my twin sister, the girl who had lived a life parallel to mine, separated by a wall of privilege and willful ignorance. There was a time her tears would have made me feel guilty, or her apology would have made me feel a rush of sisterly forgiveness. But I was past that now. I saw her apology for what it was, a desperate attempt to ease her own discomfort, not mine. "You didn't want to know," I said, my voice still quiet, but with an edge of steel. I wasn't accusing her of being the mastermind. I was accusing her of being a willing participant in her own comfort. "It was easier for you not to ask. It was easier not to look too closely." I paused, letting the words settle. I saw the flicker of recognition in her eyes. She knew I was right. Now you do. And with that, I was done. There was nothing else to say. I had spent my entire life craving their acknowledgement, their approval, their love. But standing there, looking at their pale, shocked faces, I realized I didn't need any of it anymore. Their opinion of me was no longer the measure of my worth. I turned my back on them. I didn't storm off in a blaze of anger. I didn't run away in tears. I simply turned and walked away with a sense of peace so profound it felt like floating. I walked toward the doors, toward the sunlight, toward my future. I didn't look back to see if they were watching me go. For the first time, it didn't matter. They had finally seen what they had tried so hard to erase, and I was finally free. A week later, I was back in my small apartment, surrounded by cardboard boxes. The lease was up at the end of the month, and I was packing up my life, preparing to move to New York City. The job offer had come through, exactly as the scholarship program had promised. The official email sat in my inbox, a beacon of my new reality. Offer letter, junior analyst, Ford and Levine Accounting. I accepted without a moment's hesitation. Before I sealed the last box, I did one final thing. I went to the campus print shop and made a high-quality color copy of my National Scholar Award letter. I didn't write a note. I didn't add a lengthy explanation or a final cutting remark. The document spoke for itself. I folded it neatly, slid it into a plain white envelope addressed to my parents, and dropped it into a mailbox. It wasn't an olive branch. It was proof. It was the final, silent closing argument in a case that had been tried my entire life. My apartment in New York is small, but it's mine. The view from my window is of a brick wall, but it's a view I earned. On the wall across from my bed, I have hung 3 things, each in a simple black frame. In the center is my diploma from the University of Washington. To its left is the scholarship letter, the official proof that someone saw my worth when my own family would not. And to its right is my first paycheck from Ford and Levine. They hang there as a daily reminder. They remind me of the sleepless nights, the quiet struggle, and the incredible strength that is forged in silence. They remind me of the truth I had to learn the hard way. Love that is given selectively isn't love. It's a transaction. And sometimes, being the unchosen child, the one who is told to figure it out on her own, is the painful gift that makes you unstoppable. You learn to rely on the only person who will never let you down, yourself. If you've ever had to earn the love that should have been given freely, tell me where you're watching from, because the moment they stopped choosing me was the moment I started choosing myself.